Hi, Danny Gardner. Thank you so much
Hi.
for being on my podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm going to read a little bit of your wonderful bio. Danny's an incredible Broadway performer who made his Broadway debut as Lucky in Dames at Sea at the Helen Hayes Theater. He also appeared at Radio City Music Hall as 𝐬𝐿_𝐾𝐿 in the New York Spectacular, starring the Rockettes' New York City Christmas Spectacular. He was also seen performing alongside Tommy Tune in Encore's production of Lady Be Good with subsequent album. And you've done a lot of incredible things. You're also a member of the physical comedy theater Parallel Exit, which is where I first met you, that has 3 Drama Desk nominations. And you were working on a show at Lincoln Center when the whole pandemic hit, right?
That's correct. Yeah, yeah. Flying Over Sunset, the new musical by James Lapine.
Yep. And I don't know how into the ballet world you are, but I love the ballet world, and I've been really inspired by Megan Fairchild, who's a principal with City Ballet, and she's kind of used she's been on Broadway too, but she's kind of used the pandemic as a time to interview everyone she knows in the ballet world, and it's turned into this incredible historical archive with interviews of some people that I don't think there are video archives of. So
Right.
I got kind of inspired and decided to do that in addition to other subjects that I talk about on my podcast and interview some amazing artists, because we should have historical archive of all the wonderful artists, especially being very aware of all the tragedies going on in the world and how many people are no longer with us and all that.
Yeah,
So
that's
thank you.
great. I love that.
Thank you so much for being here. And I'm excited to chat with you, especially because you have such a wonderful leg in the sort of traditional musical theater world, the musical comedy world, and dance and physical comedy and whatnot. And I think, especially with so much emphasis on contemporary musical theater, and you being, you're not 19, but you're a relative youngin, but so into the golden age stuff. Can you, I guess, tell me a little bit about your journey and where you started and how you got so interested in that aspect of musical theater?
Well, I started tap dancing when I was 5, and I started tap dancing because I had a lot of energy when I was growing up, and my parents wanted to put me into something that would tire me out, basically. But the joke was on them because then they had a energetic 5-year-old running around the house with tap shoes on.
Mm.
But I stayed with tap dance. I liked that, and I stayed with that, and then I started taking jazz and ballet, and then voice lessons. And I, I just kind of fell into it. I think it gave. If I felt like I had a home there, I got the attention that people like when they're growing up, and I think I got to express different parts of myself. And I did a lot of community theater and school shows, basically. And then I went to college at Ithaca College for musical theater. And I think I really got into one of my favorite musicals was, it was the second musical I saw on Broadway. It was Crazy for You.
Mhm.
And I loved it. It combined dance, physical comedy, and like old school music that I loved in this wonderfully kind of jukebox musical-esque way. I mean, it's based off of an earlier film that used the music of the Gershwins, but Girl
Girl
Crazy.
Crazy, which I have
Yeah.
I have an NYU story about that I'll pull out
Mhm.
at some point.
Yeah. But yeah, there was something. My grandfather really loved jazz music, and I just for some reason took to it. I loved jazz music, and I love standards. And
Mhm.
so Crazy for You was kind of my first introduction to how standards could be in a musical, because those songs weren't specifically written for Crazy for You. But I thought they were so, years ago when I first saw it, I thought they were so beautifully interwoven into the story that I just kind of fell in love with it. And when other kids would go home and listen to hip hop, I was listening to Gershwin. Um, and yeah, and so I think I liked all musical theater. I grew up. One of the community theaters I grew up at was called Genesius,
Where
and
did where did you grow up?
Reading, Pennsylvania.
And what was your studio?
My studio, it was called Marie Shaw School of Dance. It was a local studio. um, yeah, I learned a lot there. And yeah, and it was funny, the very first time I performed, the local Jewish community center was putting on Gypsy,
Mhm.
and they needed a Tulsa desperately. And so they called my dance studio and they said, "Do you have any boys that dance?"
Mhm.
And that was the first time I like played a role in a musical. Um, and I loved it. Um, and so, but that again, that's kind of an old school musical vibe that you have there. But I think, we did Secret Garden, we did Rags, which was so fun. Nobody
Yeah.
does Rags anymore. Um, but yeah, I think, but then in college, I tried to study everything as they kind of throw at you in college. I think it was only after I really got out of college and I started finding my type
Mhm.
that people were like, "Oh, you're more golden age." Golden age. You're gonna work in that a lot, very easily, and so I think because of a combination between the tap dance, that's kind of older musicals, and my voice type and the look that I have, I think I kind of fell into doing golden age musicals more so than maybe contemporary or like Sondheim or things like that. Um, but yeah, I always try to push myself to do contemporary stuff. Just recently before the pandemic hit, I was really trying to push myself to add new musical songs to my book. Try to really because I love working on new musicals. There's nothing like creating a role or ad-libbing a line and then somebody writing it down. And so yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. I guess that's how
And how
that.
did you feel when people kind of started typing you in that? Were you like, yes, this really matches how I feel about myself? Or was it more, cool, I guess I'll go that avenue because it's the path of least resistance?
I think it was a combination of both because part of me was like, oh, that music really speaks to me. I like old school stuff. I like, but then it was also like, I need to work. So whatever, however they're going to hire me, sure, I'll do it. I think it was only, that's part of the reasons I kind of get into parallel exit because I think deep inside there is this frustrated artist of like, oh, now I'm known as that. Now I want to do the exact opposite, or I want to do something like very different, like clowning, or physical comedy or stuff. So I feel like it's always a push and pull. I'll have like two shows where it's golden age classic, and then I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that for the next 6 months. And I try to do other things. It's not always successful because you got to eat and you got to get your health insurance and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's always finding that pendulum of the internal artist of trying to find, it's always the combination of commerce and art that I think, especially musical theater, is always walks that edge.
What is it about golden age musicals and that kind of music that speaks to you so deeply that you really related to as opposed to other kinds of performing or music or whatnot?
I think when I was growing up, especially because I love contemporary musical theater. I love Sondheim. I love all of it. But I think when I first started getting into it, when I was very young, I think almost, this is going to seem harsh, but almost the predictability of how songs are set up, AABA, that jazz standard kind of thing. And because it was so ingratiated into my childhood with my grandparents, they love to watch movie musicals. And so my parents, at least my mom, well, my dad did too, but that was her parents who really loved musicals. So she would play standards around the house. And I think because of that, after you hear I Got Rhythm about 5 times, you kind of know it. And so there's a hook there that the sixth time you're like, oh, I know where this is going. And I like it. And then when you hear someone else do their version of I Got Rhythm, then you feel like you're a part of it as opposed to having to work as hard. And I think as a younger child, that was fun to share something with my grandparents and my parents on that level. To be like in the know
Mhm.
in this type of music. I think when I got to middle school, definitely high school, then I started pushing into Sondheim and more contemporary things. I used to, while I was bringing the noise, bringing the funk was just like this huge explosion of what tap could be on Broadway. And so while I was doing my homework, I would just listen to that soundtrack. That was one where I was just like, I want to hear, I want to like take all of that in. And I remember sitting at the big computer, just like writing and just listening to bringing the noise, bringing the funk, because it was just, there's so much there. There's so many levels in the history of the music and the history of the dance and the way they put it all together. It was just amazing. So I think growing up, it's returning to classic golden age musicals always kind of feels like home because that's kind of where I started.
Yeah.
So,
And how did you end up at Ithaca?
well, I auditioned at a few places, but if I'm being completely honest, Ithaca offered me the most money.
Yeah.
And so my dad basically pulled me aside and he was like, "Listen, if you want to go for musical theater, we will support you, but like that's gonna be like that's the place because you know they're giving you a grant and it's you know it's a good school. It's but yeah, that's pretty much that."
And then what was your journey after graduating and moving to the city and finding a place and trying to get an agent and all that?
I After I graduated, it's a funny story. I'll try to keep it short because it can be a long story. I had a choice. I could go to move to New York City with the money that I saved from a summer job, or I could go to Europe for a month with a friend. And so I went to Europe, which I do not regret. But then I returned from Europe without any money. So I moved back in with my parents.
Mhm.
And I had two friends from my original dance school on the non-equity tour of 42nd Street.
Mhm.
And when I got home, uh, I was so broke that I was like, I'll take any job. So I was delivering telephone books.
Oh,
Like
wow.
that seems like something from a golden age musical that no
Yeah,
one
it
would
does.
believe now. You know, well, why don't you go deliver telephone books? You know, like pull yourself up from the bootstraps and deliver telephone books. It just seems outlandish, but there I was, you know, driving in my dad's van, delivering telephone books. And so then I was upset because I wasn't actually doing what I wanted to do. And my mom said, well, why don't you just call Justin and Jenny and tell them that, you know, you want to be a part of 42nd Street. And I was like, Mom, that's not how it works. She was like, just call them. And I was like, okay. So I called him and my friend Justin said, well, we don't need anybody now, but I think in the new year, some people are changing over. So why don't you send your headshot and resume in? We'll recommend you. And so I did. And then a week later, Justin called me. He said, somebody just got fired. Our Billy Lawler just got fired.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And so he said, call the casting director. So I called the casting director and I said, listen, sent my headshot and resume in. Just wanted to check that you got it. And I'd really love to be a part of it. And he said, oh, yeah, we're looking for people that have done the show before because by that time, it was like 6 years. Like that's when for the revival, it was like the 2001 revival or whatever that was.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
the Randy Skinner revival. And but like it had been a tour, it had gone through the
By the
equity
way, the
tour.
first person that I interviewed for this series was Meredith Patterson. So
Hmm.
42nd Street connection there.
I love it. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Um, so it had already been like it had been on Broadway, it had done the national tour, and now this was like the very end of it. So there were a lot of people that knew this show. And the casting director said, listen, we're looking for somebody that already knows the show, but if we can't find somebody, we'll hire you. And I was like, oh, okay. Like,
Like
uh,
sight unseen, they were going
great.
to hire you.
Yeah, yeah.
This is like before the days of everybody being able to self tape really easily
Oh,
and
yeah,
not.
yeah. No, this guy had my headshot and resume and recommendations from my friends.
Yeah.
That was it. And so he said, I'll call you Friday and let you know. So I was like, okay. So he called me Friday and he said, do you want to go on tour? And
Wow.
so Monday I was delivering telephone books, and then like that a week later I was on a flight out to California to join the national tour of 42nd Street. So my mother was correct. Just call and they'll let you in the show.
That's the secret they're not telling you in school.
Exactly,
Oh.
exactly.
And then I'm assuming from there you saved up your money, you got a place when you came back to New York, and then you just started the grind.
Yeah, a lot of the connections at first that I made were from community theater. There was a guy who, so Michael O'Flaherty, who was the musical director at Goodspeed Opera House, he's from my hometown.
Oh, wow.
So a friend that he grew up with at 𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵 Theater, he recommended that I audition, and he kind of, got my foot in the door because they were doing Singing in the Rain. And so I auditioned for Singing in the Rain, and I think it was a combination of Michael O'Flaherty saying, hey, that guy, and also being able to dance and do what they needed to do. Then I got Singing in the Rain at Goodspeed, and then I describe my career as wearing people down. Because if you give me a chance, I will be like the bad penny that keeps turning up. I will email you. I will be like, hey, I'm in town.
Yeah.
So so anyway, then after that, I still wasn't living in the city, but they needed somebody for their next show because they had somebody else drop out of that show. So I did 2 shows at Goodspeed back to back. And then after that, then I moved to New York and I just started grinding. And that's actually how I got an agent. Somebody at Goodspeed in the cast of Singing in the Rain said, oh yeah, you need an agent. My agent is coming. Why don't you meet him? And yeah, and that's how that happened.
And did you get your equity card from Goodspeed, or were you still non-union at this point?
I was still non-union. And then I actually worked at the Fulton Opera House, and I did Oliver there, and that's when I got my equity card. It was actually that was their holiday show, so it was that holiday season after Singing in the Rain and High Button Shoes that I went down to do Oliver.
Who'd you play in Oliver?
Artful Dodger.
Yes.
Yeah. The director was like, no, we're going to do it a different way. Like, he's like a teenager. He's not going to be a cute, like, he's kind of Fagin's protege.
I've seen it done like that. It actually can work really well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was fun. But whenever I say that, everyone goes, how old were you? And I was like, oh, I was like 22.
I played Dodger when I kid you not, I was 4 years old at like a little preschool camp, and they were doing like a little after school, like, let's do Oliver. And like, who's there? And they go down, everybody like wants to play Oliver, and like, oh, I don't know why this is the show they chose for like 4-year-olds. And I'm like, I want to play Dodger. And I was the only one. So
it's a great role. It's so much fun. Yeah.
Well, so the thing I want to throw out for all of my listeners at home is the aspect to the story that's important to keep in mind is that you're extraordinarily talented. So like when people would get recommendations and they would hire you, you could deliver. Like you showed up and you were really good at what you did. So
thank you.
I think that's important for everybody to also keep in mind. So now you're in the city, and and you have an agent. What are you doing now?
I think it's just kind of auditioning, taking dance class, finding a vocal coach, things like that.
And right now, we're now at like, are we around like 2006 or so at this point?
That would be by this time. I moved to the city in 2007, the end of 2007, and yeah, and then I did I went back to the Ithaca area. I did Merry-Go-Round Playhouse a few more times. I did the Hangar Theater in Ithaca.
And at this point on Broadway, there's not a lot of golden age stuff that's going on. I mean, we're talking the era now of like the Spring Awakenings and whatnot. And I'm trying to think, there was Nice Work If You Could Get It. There was the Anything Goes revival a few years later.
Yeah.
But we're kind of going into like the era of lack of tap on Broadway. So what was that like to have this wonderful niche that you love so much, and then you finally you have an agent, you have your equity card, you have these great credits, and you're now hitting the pavement, and there's not necessarily that many opportunities for your niche on Broadway.
Right. Well, I think honestly, when being a young actor, I believed that I could do anything, that
Yeah.
I didn't have a type. And I think it takes a little bit to realize no matter how versatile you are, or, a wonderful actor or singer or dancer or whatever, there is a type, there is but I think at the beginning I didn't believe that. So I was
Which
like,
is not
no,
that
I'm
you
not,
can't do other things, because I've seen you do very different things and you're equally extraordinary. So you
right.
can do lots of stuff, but with needing to get your foot in the door, your typing is always a
Exactly.
frustrating, difficult thing that we all must deal with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Did you go
So,
for anything that you felt you were wildly wrong for?
oh gosh, I feel like nothing's. I remember the feeling. I forget exactly what it was, but yeah, there were a few things that I was like, what am I doing here? Like specifically, well, this is just a few years ago, but like, because I'm at a different part in my career now, where like you would come in and they'd be like, okay, we need ballet dancers who tumble, and it's
Right.
like, I don't, I don't really do that. I never tumbled, and I kind of did ballet,
Yeah.
so you don't want me. Like there are so many other people that you want. I'll try it, but
Yeah.
like, you know, if you have a character role that does that, um, but yeah, at the time, I think it was a little frustrating. The only thing I remember that had tap in it was Drowsy Chaperone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I am absolutely good. Because I remember getting like the actual paper backstage and seeing that breakdown for, oh gosh, the groom. Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my gosh, tap dance, golden age and all this stuff. And then it said roller skating. And I was like, I don't, I don't roller skate. But my friend Jeremy was like, no, you'll be great. Come on, go in.
That's
And
just
I
how
think
you're like,
I like,
yes, I've been I'm national champion roller skater.
exactly. um, but that's the one where I vividly remember like, oh, this is something that's right up my alley that I could like do. It's the thing that was the closest to me at that time.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I remember auditioning for Anything Goes. For all those, I wasn't what they were looking for at the time.
Has it ever been a challenge, the fact that you look so young? Like, I feel like you're never going to look older than being in your 20s, like your entire life. Um,
Um, yeah, I think I think there is that it is a little hard to get that boyish feeling off
mhm.
and be like, oh, you're a leading man now, like that kind of thing. And I've played leading men, but it's there is definitely like, you know, I don't know. There is a difference finding that how you get to that level of no, I can play the leading man. It's just going to be a younger leading man, or like the comedy leading man, that kind of thing. Crazy for You and things like that.
Is there a role that you've always wanted to play that you haven't had a chance to do yet?
I would love two, and it's funny they're both Sondheim. I'd love to play the baker in Into the Woods.
Oh, you'd be great as the baker.
I'd love to play that, and George in Sunday in the Park with George.
You'd be great as
Uh,
the too.
Yeah, those are two, and I think it's because I haven't worked in contemporary musical theater or, yeah, contemporary musical theater as much as I'd like to, and it's a muscle that I kind of worked in college and I've worked a few times, but it just seems so fun and challenging and exciting.
What drew you to Parallel Exit, or how did that all happen? Because I'd also like to preference for all our listeners, when Danny talks about clowning, I feel like I'm like the Herald in New York for this. Unfortunately, a lot of people tend to think of like birthday party clowns and whatnot, which is
Sure.
great. But Danny is part of the premier physical comedy company in New York City, and I would argue possibly North America. But the physical comedy based on Buster Keaton and Chaplin, and I would also argue the kind of physical comedy that does occur in Golden Age musical theater, just not always with singing and dancing, although you do dance with Parallel Exit as well. But how did that connection come about?
So I was doing, I think it was 2008, 2008 or 2009 that I was, no, it was 2008, that I was doing White Christmas at Theater Under the Stars in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And another company member, Brent Macbeth,
Yeah.
he was in it too. We were both in the ensemble. And we'd be backstage just silently making each other laugh with like just stupid, like, oh, I dropped my hat. Now he dropped his hat. Let me get your hat. You get my hat. And then we dropped just silly things. And we became fast friends. And he said, I think I'm part of a company that I think you'd be really good for.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had, and because part of Parallel Exits, like you said, their arsenal of virtuosity is that they tap dance a lot. They use tap dance and dance usually in comedic ways. And so because I tap danced, he said, I'm going to keep you in mind. So if we need a replacement or whatever. And the one time they did, they were doing a show called Exit Stage Left at, I think,
Victory? Was that when they did it New Victory?
no, it was like, I think it was at King's College or something. It was like at a college. It was very like last minute. Ryan Kasperzak, who was another company member, he got another gig and they were like,
Yeah.
we have a week. We need somebody like trial by fire. You need to do this. And so I was like, yeah. And so I did that. And because I was kind of a quick study and I was able to learn their type of comedy pretty quickly, they kind of kept me on as a replacement, as a secondary. And then Ryan got Annie on Broadway, and that's when they were doing Time Step at the New Victory.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to fill in for him fully. And after that, they asked me to be a company member. And then we've created shows together. We created Room 17B, Everybody Gets Cake, multiple other shows that are still kind of in process, but things like that. But yeah, so that's how it was. It was kind of through tap dance, but the love of comedy and physical comedy has always kind of been with me. And so it's fun to be able to flex that muscle.
Can you talk a little bit about being a company member in a company? Because that was a weird sentence, but kind of outside of the, dance world of like ballet or contemporary dance, the idea of being in a company is something that's so inherent in the history of theater and yet doesn't really happen very much anymore,
Yeah.
where it's like I grew up in a rep company, so I adore it and have come to realize that it's a very rare thing to find. But what's that process been like for you, where there's like a small number of people, then you're basically all a part of creating everything you do and doing every show you do with, a few exceptions here and there. But what's that been
Yeah.
like for you?
I love it. When I when they first asked me to be a member, I was ecstatic because I never had that kind of group, especially in like a comedy kind of sense. And the great thing about being in that company is that after a year, 2 years, you start to know. I guess it's a double-edged sword, but you start to know like where people will land
Right.
in respect of like, oh, I can trust all of them, but he's always kind of going to be lowbrow, and so then I have to be highbrow. And so, for example, Joel is usually like the clown in charge. He's kind of the angry clown that, and we get to be the goofballs. But then when you start taking Joel out of the picture, then it's kind of like, oh, Ryan is even more a goofball. So then I have to take on, the highbrow kind of thing. And so it's fun to be able to interchange like that and to see, well, this is where you would naturally go, but today we're going to switch that. And now you're going to be on top, I'm going to be on bottom. And it's so fun. Also then to know how people create. Because we create our own shows and we don't usually take, like standard material, like we don't, take a musical or a play and then interpret it ourselves. We're creating it. It's fun to be able to say, to be in that room and trust these people so much that you can bring out bad ideas
Yeah.
and you can fail in front of each other. And that's so wonderful. That is an aspect that I would not trade.
That's the thing that I feel like finally brought me into my own as an actor is I realized that I'd been in like it was like school and whatnot. In an ideal world, you end up with a wonderful group who you trust and all that. But I realized that I had spent so much time in groups of people that I didn't fully trust, that when I found myself in a show where there was that trust and we could all fail safely, that's what finally allowed me to take chances and commit to things that I wouldn't necessarily have done before.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you balance in a situation like that? How do you balance knowing what your niche is and what you do well in relation to everybody else with wanting to challenge yourself and not just fall into a rut?
I think it has to be a very conscious thing because if you're also the one who always, if you're always lowbrow or whatever, you have to be able to know that first of all, and then secondly, if you want to try something new, you have to be the advocate to say, listen, I know this is the way I usually am, but I want to try this time. I want to try something a little more experimental. I want to try what if Joel was, the guy who was goofy this time and I was the one who was angry or whatever. But you have to be that advocate because it is easy to fall into your normal roles. But the great thing about parallel eggs, I don't know if all companies are like this, but they are they're willing to go there. They're willing to be like, yeah, sure, okay, let's try it. Which is so exciting and rewarding to be able to be a part of something like that.
What's it like going back and forth from an environment like that to, very standard musical theater where even if you have a great collaborative director, the actors are not usually very much a part of the creation process? I feel like especially in the dance world, but in musical theater in general, we're kind of trained, you do what the director tells you. And great if you have an idea now and again, but in general, you do what the director tells you.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is it for you going back and forth between those two worlds?
I love it and I try to seek it out because I think it's almost like I've been looking for an analogy for this. It's almost like this is such a weird analogy. This is my analogy for it today. It's almost like building what is it? A ship in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So with parallel exit with creating your own works, it's like someone is like, yeah, there's a bunch of wood there. There's a glass bottle. Just do it. And you're the one with everyone else who has to painstakingly take these pieces and get it into the bottle.
Yeah.
And you have to do everything yourself. As opposed to like musical theater or a show at a regional theater, Broadway, the bottle and the ship is kind of given to you and you have one task. They're like, you're going to paint the flags. That's all you're going to do, but you're going to paint those flags so well that you are the flag painter. No one else can be the flag painter. And so you have to painstakingly get that little brush in. And I think either way makes you a better artist because when I'm with Parallel Exit, you have to set your own props. And if you don't set your props aren't going to be there.
Yeah.
We have a stage manager sometimes, but the stage manager has her own, like we would go into a venue and she'd be like, okay, I have to set lights with tech. I have to put down the marks. I have to do all this stuff. You guys have to be responsible for your props. And so you have to do that. Whereas and you have to get your costume ready. You got to like bring your costume. You got to, as opposed to in a larger show, your responsibility is to perform. And you don't have to worry about making the set or setting your props or creating the props or creating the actual stuff that you're going to be working on. And either way, I actually love either way, but beautiful part that I've been very lucky to be able to do is ping pong back and forth, because you get to appreciate each one that much more than when you're doing it and when you're not doing it.
Yeah. And I kind of wish that that mentality could be added to the mentality of a lot of commercial casting directors and directors out there. Because I remember, because I've collaborated with Joel for a while, and it was interesting. The first thing that we worked on together, you know, most often when you're writing like a commercial piece of theater, you kind of come up with the characters, and then later you're going to go find the people that like fit that. And Joel and I sat down, and Joel's sort of immediate thing was, well, I sort of have in my mind like a conglomeration of people, and this person does this really well, and this person does this, so we could like write those in, and those could, and it created this whole other way of creating the piece. And it also, I think, encourages not just having an idea of a type that you want and then going and finding that type, but being able to look at human beings as unique and wonderful and special, and
Yeah.
how can we use them in a unique way. And I think the meeting of those two things, it could be very helpful in different situations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So then how did you get your big Broadway break?
So when I first moved to New York, everybody would tell me, you have to be a Randy Skinner dancer. He's going to love your style. He's going to love your look. You have to audition for him. And I would audition for White Christmas. I think I did it 3 years in a row, and
Mhm.
I got cut after the first dance call each time.
Seriously, wow.
And I just couldn't, you know, get
His
him
stuff,
to.
his stuff is hard. I'm not meaning that it was too hard, but I'm just thinking back to all the classes I've taken with Randy, and
Yeah. And he has such a wonderful eye in the style. Like his style is so specific that I had to start taking class. I started taking his a theater dance class, but then his also tap class, and I started learning his style a little more. But then also, after class, I would go up and say, "Hey, Randy, good to see you." And then eventually, he learned who I was, and um, that was a huge part. And so he, when they were auditioning for Lady Be Good at Encores, he kind of fought for me
Mm.
to get the role. He was the choreographer, and um, and he actually the director wasn't sure which way to go with the lead role, and Randy said, "Well, why don't you just have another work session with him?" And
Mm.
so I was actually in rehearsals for White Christmas, the tour at the time, and on
Mhm.
our lunch break from White Christmas, I went over and I auditioned for Lady Be Good, um, and it was basically a huge part of it was Randy being such a cheerleader for me, um, because I got White Christmas. I played the non-dancing, non-singing role, Mike Nolte, the
That's
stage manager.
hilarious.
Yeah, it was a character role, and I was like, oh, sure. If you want to pay me for that, sure, that would be fun. Um, and so I did that, and then I got Lady Be Good right after that, and those were both Randy shows. And then after that, by that point, he saw that I was, he could trust me with his work. And then later that year, they did well, it was. Some people say it was a revival, but Dames at Sea was never on Broadway,
Yeah.
so it was really the debut
It also
of
has
Dames
been
at
like
Sea.
many years since it was on kind of in any capacity. So
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
But yeah, and so it was a lot of it was Randy believing in me. He was the director and choreographer of Dames at Sea, and so yeah, he just was a big fan of mine, and I'm always very much grateful for him believing in me and giving me that chance.
So for all those people, I feel like tap and golden age stuff has become less and less a part of training programs, or there's a generation of teachers that's kind of all they do, and they kind of look down at like rock musicals. Um, but all that's to say, I feel like the younger people that are coming up don't really pay attention to it as much as maybe it would be great too. And, tap is kind of disappearing as one of the big things that you need to do. Like I know so many people that are like, oh, I don't have time for my tap classes anymore. I got to get into contemporary because of all the, all that stuff and whatnot. So what would your sort of, like, I don't know, argument be for why it needs to be continued to be emphasized in training programs, for young people wanting to come into musical theater, not just tap, but also golden age in that specific style? And, not just, I feel like there's an idea that if you can sort of just stand on stage and belt a rock song, that's kind of all you need these days.
Right. I
Yeah.
think um, I think in Golden Age musicals, I think there is the history of how it developed.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, if you look at Lady Be Good, that was literally they were taking things from vaudeville
Right.
and burlesque and literally just like taking that and putting it there. And it's amazing how the American musical kind of combined all these art forms, operetta, vaudeville, burlesque, and it created this thing where there's an actual plot, there's a through line of all these things. And I think going through, like actually being in those, helps you recognize, oh, that's how it was developed. And we're standing on their shoulders.
Mhm.
Um, and even comedically wise, you can look at the thing that I will say that, and people are doing they're starting to do it in a smart way, is they were written at a different time. So when I think of
I was
anything,
going to ask you about that. Yeah.
when I think of anything goes, I think there can be some big problems with it.
Mhm.
And I think I'm not the higher ups that own the rights to it, so I don't know how they feel about changing it or making it contemporary. But I think it needs to be dealt with, because if it's not, I feel like it will just die out. Um, but that being said, I think there are beautiful stories and ways of doing the shows that everyone can enjoy in a contemporary way. Um, but I think there's a lot to gain from doing it, because sometimes in older shows the material seems trite. It can seem boring or simplistic, but that doesn't mean you can just do it that way. You as the performer, it's such a beautiful challenge to be able to take this simplistic scene that goes directly into a song. How do you do that in a contemporary way and get people to believe you? You
Mhm.
know, that in itself I think can be a challenge. And I think by doing that, you learn you're only helping your craft. Um, as with tap dance, I think tap dance on a very basic level um, helps. I mean, it's kind of a silly thing to say, but it helps rhythm. You become a rhythmic performer more so when you tap dance, because there's a relationship you have to start to gain as a tap dancer with music that I don't think happens or may not happen in contemporary or ballet or things like that. There's a different relationship because you are part of the band. Tap dance jazz bands used to travel with tap dancers. It was a real part of the music. And to know that and to carry that into all the other dance forms, I think is so helpful.
What what's your secret for when you approach acting a role in a show like that? Because I think when you were talking about that, it can stereotypically be viewed as a little trite sometimes. And I think along with that, sometimes you get the stereotype of the trite musical theater performer. And one of the things that I really love about your performances is, you're such a wonderful actor and you bring so much depth to everything you do, and honesty that feels very period appropriate, but also very truthful. And it's not something that I see all the time in those shows. So how did you start doing that? How did you get so good at that? And why do you think that that's not always the case for everybody?
Um, I think there's something in college. I think it might have been Michael Chekhov in
Mm-hmm.
his acting book. I feel like he was the one, or was it? Robert Cohen. I don't know. But one of them said, you can never judge the material.
Yeah.
It's not about, as in, if you're given a role and right away you're like, "Oh, we're doing Oklahoma. Okay, well, it's going to be an uphill battle. Like you can't, as an artist, I think judging the material is can be really deadly. And so I like to, like, for example, I did at I did Cats at the Hangar Theater.
Did you play in Cats?
I was Mungo Jerry,
Yes.
and it
Yes.
was not the original choreography, but but I was like, well, that's my summer gig. I was studying in London, and I got cast in it, and I was like, oh man, I have to do Cats. I have to do Cats. I have to do Cats this summer,
Wait, did
and I
you do
was like,
for abroad when you were in college?
yes, I studied abroad when I was in college. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the way that I think I have to work for myself is find a way in that is truthful to you. And so I was like, okay, I love history. I love to do research. And so I was like, let's do it. Let's go back to T.S. Eliot. Let's do it. And I read all the poems, and I tried to be like I did. I looked for the research about how Cats was developed. Some of that did not help at all. But at some point, because at one point Andrew Lloyd Webber just said, no, it's about cats.
Yeah.
Like that was a famous quote that, and so that did not help me as how I wanted to do it. And so I had to find my own way in that inspired me. And the same with finding, like, reading autobiographies. I read when I was doing when I did Oklahoma. If you can believe this, I played 𝐿𝐸𝐵𝐿𝐸.
Gosh.
But, yeah, it was an interesting production. But I read Green Grow the Lilacs. You know, that I love knowing where it comes from. And you can have you can feel however you want about the what you're going to do, but if you can't find your way in and make it honest and have some kind of foundation of, I can go back to that. I feel good about T.S. Eliot's poems. I feel good about Green Grows the Lilacs and where it was at that point, and trying to understand the people at the time. You know, how revolutionary it was at the time. Always gets me excited, and then I have something to go off of. And in a way, it makes it more realistic.
Did you do much studying of like straight acting? Because I find that that's also something that goes by the wayside in a lot of musical theater programs, because there's so much like we got to sing and we got to do all these dance styles, and you can sort of fake the acting a little bit. But was that
Yeah.
part of your training?
That's one of the reasons I actually really liked, I chose to go to Ithaca, besides them giving me money, was that they had independent acting classes. Like, you had to do specific acting, and I had really great acting professors there. They were very honest with me, and I think it was really helpful. They there were some of it was Meisner, some of it was and I seem to go back to that. But the material that they gave us, like, you know, Michael Chekhov, Robert Cohen, things like that, and Meisner, I think it really made me approach acting in a different way. And because I'd never studied it, like when I was growing up, I had voice lessons, I had dance lessons, but I had never had acting. So I was almost like, oh, I want this. I want to know what this is about. I think having that hunger really helped me get into that. So I was kind of or I kind of thought I knew what I was doing with singing and dancing. So acting, I was like, yes, give me everything. And that, I think, really helped. And like I said, they were honest. Like, when we had they call it, well, they're not called juries up there, but we had juries every yeah, we had two our freshman year and then three our sophomore year. And if you make the last one, then you're like in the program. But there were a few people who like went to their last jury and they didn't get it, and they were like thrown out of the BFA program.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. I mean, that's
yeah.
But they would be honest with me. They were like, we didn't believe you. Like you know, you need to go back and you need to woodshed that and really figure out how you get into that.
Did you
So
do monologues for your initial audition to get into the school?
yes, yes, yeah.
And going back to something you touched on, there's been a lot of talk recently about certain older shows having a lot of issues in our contemporary society. And I mean, I was just thinking about Good News is a show that is very near and dear to my heart, and just realizing like it's 100 years old now.
Wow, yeah.
Basically, I mean, give or take like a little bit, but it's basically 100 years now. We're kind of coming up on the 100th anniversary of some of these pieces. And what are your thoughts? Because I mean, I've heard people be like, don't ever do Showboat again, and don't ever do this again, and they're antiquated and they're inappropriate and they're hurtful, and without obviously being somebody who runs one of these estates who can make decisions about changing the material. What are your feelings about reviving them, or if you're cast in a piece that's questionable in certain ways? I guess just how do you feel about the genre in our current day and age?
Um, I really go back and forth about this. When I, I, it's really hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard because I love some of these musicals, but you know, anything goes. Man, you gotta cut stuff. Like it was written in a different time.
It seems
And
like it was a big issue when that was revived too recently.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think I saw the revival of Carousel. And while it was beautiful and it was beautifully choreographed and beautifully staged and the acting and singing was spectacular, I thought, I just don't know. My biggest thing is that if young children, if a young girl or a young boy sees this and they see us clapping for a show where a woman gets hit and abused, regardless of are they at a place where they can be like, oh, well, that
Right.
was a different time.
Yeah.
That we're not, I just worry so much. Like my nieces, like, what would they think? What would my, nephews think? And so I, I, I wish I had an answer because I think there is something beautiful about them. They're obviously part of the musical theater canon, and they broke broke boundaries, and there were all these beautiful things. But in my most revolutionary days, I'm just like, burn it down and let's create new stuff. And I hate to say that, but I there is like if we can't like change it or do it in a contemporary way, then like maybe it should be a museum piece. Maybe it should be a thing that it's like, well, that's how they created that. You know.
Do you have any ideas for how we can be creating things that bring the best of that to today? Because you don't see a lot of new shows being written that have tap and have a certain kind of song and have just sort of a certain, I mean, The Producers was kind of the big revolutionary one of like the golden age of musical theater is back and it's modern, but
Right.
you don't see shows like that being written, and yet you see those kinds of shows being the most popular to do at regional theaters and whatnot. So, do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be like, for example, right before it shut down, Flying Over Sunset had a huge, not huge, but there was a tap dance component, and it's because the character Cary Grant, he was a dancer in vaudeville. And
Mhm.
now I don't think he was a tap dancer. They were taking a little liberty with that, but there's this spectacular tap number that Tony does with his younger self.
Mhm.
Tony 𝐬𝐫𝐞 does with his younger self, and it's this beautiful harkening back to what it was like, but then it morphs into this LSD trip. Like the show is about these four people doing LSD and it helping them therapeutically back in the 60s. And I think it's a beautiful way to heighten, tap dance can be a beautiful way to heighten reality, because that's what it kind of does in that show. But the other thing that I love about Michelle Dorrance's choreography in that is that at the beginning of Act Two, there's this component of the four main characters being haunted by their past, and they're haunted by their past by actual, like, somebody's mother, somebody's sister, all these things. And at the beginning, I hope I'm not giving anything away, but anyway, at the beginning of the second act, it starts out with these the ghosts walking out, and there's this rhythmic heartbeat to it,
Mm.
and that's tap dance. They're creating the rhythm for Act Two. They're starting it out by being like, "We're still here, and you're going to dance to our beat because you haven't dealt with what you haven't dealt with us. You haven't dealt with your ghosts." Um, I think the other thing is tap, specifically tap. I think it can be utilized in a lot of exciting ways that it hasn't been. Like, for if you look at the Scottsboro Boys,
Oh my
which,
gosh,
I
yes.
mean, that tap dance number in the electric chair was chilling.
Yeah.
Was that, and that was a beautiful way, because that whole show, I know that had a lot of problems. There was a lot of people that did not enjoy that, but I I I was sucked in and pulled away, like, the whole time.
Yeah.
And I haven't felt that way about a musical in a long time, because it was so virtuosic. It was so like, these performers are amazing, but oh my God, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And that combination just was magical in a way. Because it did. We were trying to confront something that is part of our history, that's just horrible. And so that's a way I think that it can be contemporary.
Why do you think it's not utilized as much as it could be?
I think sometimes tap dance is looked at just fun and happy, and I think it can be like, that's like a majority of the time it is. But then you have stuff like Billy Elliot, where he has the angry dance where he's breaking down, and I think it hasn't been explored. I think the stereotype of tap dance is just like jazz hands and time steps, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the history, but I think there is an earthiness to it that actually, in college, my friend Jeremy Pickard, who now he runs a ecological theater company,
Mm.
and I always wanted to do a modern retelling or a tap dance version of Oedipus,
Oh,
because when they took him and because when when his parents found out they were going to sleep with the mother and kill the father, they took him out and they left him for dead, and
right.
they actually put I think they, like, nailed his feet to a stake or something.
Yeah. Yeah. As you
And
do in Greek
yeah,
shows.
as you do.
Yeah.
But there's this thing of, like, these sore feet the whole time, these bloody feet. Like, he's been affected, the way he walks and everything.
Mhm.
And I was like, what an interesting way, like, what an interesting relationship to the ground this character has.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, but I think there are heightened realities that we can add it in. But I think the stereotype of tap dance sometimes can be limiting.
Yeah.
And it's people like Michelle Dorrance that I think are really pushing the boundaries of what rhythm, because at the end of the day, it's just rhythm. You know, we carry, when I teach tap dance, I say we carry a whole drum set with us wherever we walk. We just don't know it. And there's a rhythm to everything. Our heartbeat, the way we walk, the way we breathe, the crickets, like, there's a plethora of rhythm. And all that tap dance for me is doing is giving notice to that rhythm and the way we walk. And so I think if we look at it in that way, I think it can be more, it can be explored more. But don't get me wrong, I love just a great tap number too.
Um, what what advice would you give to people starting out who want to have a career like yours, um, and want to get really good at all that stuff, but also all the other things that I briefly mentioned and have certainly been hinted at just in terms of your success in your career that aren't really taught at school about, how do you, show up and take over a role and deliver? And how do you have the confidence to harassing people to cast you and whatnot? What would your advice be to other people?
Uh, well, I would say work really hard,
Hmm.
obviously. And the other thing is like be be nice. It seems like such a simple thing, but like being nice and genuine, I think is so it can be a breath of fresh air
Yeah.
in the theater business sometimes. I know a lot of genuine people, but I know a lot of people who are trying to get ahead, and there's nothing wrong with that. But knowing how to do that in a genuine way, I think is good. Um, I think also staying curious and listening to your inner artist is always going to help. There's a lot of, or there can be a lot of downtime when you're performing. In the before times, I don't know what it's going to be like in the after times, but in the before times, before COVID and all this other stuff, um, you'd audition and then maybe you'd get a show, but you'd have a month where you were auditioning and not doing other things and maybe working a side gig. Let the inner artist create your own stuff. I mean, you are such a beautiful example of that. No, the amount of projects you have and you do is just staggering, and it's amazing because there's like no downtime. It seems,
Yeah.
but I feel like you're being honest with your inner artist and being like, oh, she's hungry right now,
Hmm.
and I want to feed it. And so going into, I want to do a solo version of producers, or I don't know, like something
I would
crazy.
love to see you do that, especially Ula and all of the little old ladies.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think creating your own work is only going to help you in the long run because you learn about your creative process, you learn about how to create, like how do you write, and then that helps you bring someone else's words to life. Um, I think also, especially nowadays, like especially during the pandemic, so many people have gone online to cast things. And so getting your name out there with stuff, knowing being social media savvy, I hate to say that, but because I'm not as savvy as I'd like to be, but um, yeah, I think all of that, creating your own stuff, being genuine and nice, and yeah, giving into the hunger.
Mhm.
It's okay not to like some things. I
Yeah.
think sometimes when I was growing up, it was like you have to like all musicals and you have to like all different types of theater. And if you like Jacob and oh no wait Joseph, oh my God,
Yeah.
Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, man, you go into that. There's people are always gonna love that somewhere. If you love cats, go into cats. The last thing I'll say is don't be afraid to contact people
Hmm.
because no one, Joe Calarco, who's written stuff, he's now at the Signature in DC. He went to Ithaca and he said this in a panel once. He said, "No one is going to be upset getting an email from you saying, 'Hey, I really like what you do.'
Yep.
No
Yeah.
one's
I say this
ever
all
going
the
to,
time. You have to ask people, ask nicely, but you have to
yeah,
ask people.
yeah." And it's as simple as like, "Hey, I saw your production or I saw this thing online or something like that." And it's like, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate what you do. I like this aspect of it. It rings to me true in this way. If you need someone to assist you, to help you with pre-production, all that stuff, I'm here. But then you have to follow up. There's people's lives get crazy. And so just following up and being like, hey, I'm still here, whatever. That has, been so effective for me.
What's been the most challenging thing about your career, and what in your career are you the most proud of?
I think the most challenging thing, I think, and I'm still figuring it out, is work-life balance.
Hmm.
And I think when I was younger, there was this wrong assumption that I don't know if I got it from my parents, I don't know, but like work is above all.
Hmm.
So,
It's probably most
like,
Americans,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like if I would tell my, like when I was younger, when I would tell my mom, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to come home for Christmas. She was like, oh, why not? Well, I'm doing a show. She was, oh, well, okay. Like that would make her understand.
Yeah.
But if I were to, but that always seemed to be above everything else. And I think that affected relationships.
Mhm.
It can affect relationships in a negative way.
Yeah.
Um, there's nothing wrong with being hungry and being, enthusiastic about what you do. But I think finding the time to turn off and then look at the relationships around you, I think is something I'm still learning. And I think it can be very important.
Yeah.
Um, I think the thing I'm most proud of is I think it's the fact that I have been able to go back and forth. Um, of being able to perform on Broadway, which was
Mhm.
just fantastic. It was a dream come true. But then also doing small shows like with Parallel Exit and creating work like that. Traveling to the Middle East with a tap company and things like that. Um, the many facets and starting to choreograph more.
Mhm.
Um, I think the many facets has really, I think that's what I'm most proud of. And I
Mhm.
would love to explore that more, like keep pushing the boundaries of my type or whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
Of
that's,
your type, if there was something you could like broadcast to all the casting directors and directors out there that maybe they don't know about you that you'd like them to know about you, what would you want them to know?
oh, that's interesting. Um, I guess, uh, well, yeah, this is this is a deep-seated thing that because I've been tap dancing since I was 5,
Yeah.
I don't just tap dance.
Hmm.
I think that's something that, and there's not like when you're first growing up and you're first doing what you do, you have to, it's almost like you have to pigeonhole yourself just to get through the door, just to get people to pay attention. Like, I'm the tap dancer. You can trust me.
Right.
And then at some point, I like acting. I like singing. And so I think being able to do those things, that's like a deep seated thing now that I'm trying to say, no, 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 I don't just tap dance. And I love contemporary theater. I really do. I love creating a role. I was doing a show for like 4 years, and I started from when it was a one act, and then they did the second act, and I was with it. I was playing this role. I would ad lib lines, and then they'd write them down, and they created a charm song with a tap dance just for me. And it was this past season, I was going to come to Off Broadway, and
Mhm.
it just didn't work out for me to be a part of it. But creating that in a new musical and being in like the trenches with all these people creating something was amazing. So I love contemporary musical theater. Yeah.
And I'll go on record and say that you're a phenomenal actor, like in any capacity. And I've seen you do straight stuff with no comedy or music or dance in it at all, and you're really, really good. So anybody out there who's looking to cast that as well. That's the
Thank you.
thing. I feel like you have to be a good actor in order to be good at comedy and music. Like if you're
Right,
really good at those things, you have to be good at drama.
right,
Doesn't always work in reverse. Like a good dramatic actor can't necessarily do comedy, but you have to be a really good actor to do comedy well. So I wish more people would trust that and take a leap with that. And one
right.
last thing that's my favorite question to ask people is there a question that you've always wanted to be asked in an interview and never have been?
Ooh. um, I don't know. Nothing springing to mind, but what? Oh, it's something's developing. Something's developing. Uh, how that'd be interesting. I don't know if I'd want this asked, but but it'd be interesting for other people to answer. How do you think your, oh, this is very therapeutic. How do you think your family dynamic affected your career?
And if you were going to answer that, how would you? You can take a pass as well if you do not feel like going into anything. But how would you?
No, I think I think being I was a middle child, and I
Mhm.
think looking for attention was definitely a big part of growing up, and I think that's maybe partially why I got into tap dance and stuff. But my brother and my sister all like performed. My brother went to Muhlenberg College for acting. My sister and I went to dance school together. And so there was always like this performing aspect of us growing up. Um, but I think my parents also, um, my dad was always funny. He was always, I got a great sense of humor from him.
Mhm.
And then my mom loved to sing and she loved watching things. And so I think just that there's a lot of combination to sibling dynamics and then parental dynamics that I think definitely shaped and is still shaping, my my life and things like that. And yeah.
Do your siblings do the same kind of performing that you do?
Um, they did. My sister doesn't perform anymore, but she would do the school shows and things like that. My brother went to college for acting, and then he went to Chicago, and he was an actor in Chicago for a little bit. And then when he got married and had a child, he was like, I need something more consistent. And so now he's a resident carpenter at Yale Rep.
Oh, wow.
So he works at Yale Rep, but a bunch of his friends from college actually moved up to New Haven. Some of them were from there, and some of them, moved up there. And they have a theater company called Broken Umbrella.
Oh, cool.
And he performs. They create site-specific work, and it's spectacle heavy, and but it's really I've done a few performances with them. It's really fantastic because again, it's kind of like this company that creates all this material themselves, and they're responsible for the sets. They're responsible for the music. It's really wonderful. So he does that kind of acting, performing, but he's a wonderful singer, and he was a tap dancer for a little bit. So yeah.
And where can people find you online if they want to stalk you or cast you or watch
Yeah.
your media? What's your website? What are your social media handles and all that?
My website is Danny Danny J Gardner Gardner .com. So it's just Danny J Gardner, and then my Instagram is at. Oh man, I always forget it.
I know I do the same thing.
No, wait, let me find it.
Okay.
I don't. It's funny. I don't really use Twitter that much. I realized I'm such a visual person.
Yeah.
Um, so my Instagram is Danny Danny JGNYC.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's Instagram, and then if you look up, I have a fan page. Hi.
The kitty who does not want to be here. You came
Aw.
over here.
What's your cat's name?
Poppy.
Poppy. Oh,
Poppy. Come say hi to Danny and the
hi.
viewers at home.
Hi.
She's a very, very long body and incredible flexibility. So we joke that she's a vegan of a dancer because she's insane.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And you are also an incredible tap teacher and you've been teaching
Yeah.
virtually. So I guess number one thing I'd recommend people to do to follow in your footsteps is to literally follow in your footsteps and go take some classes from you.
Yeah.
And you teach through steps, right? So steps on Broadway?
Yeah, I teach one class a week through Steps, and then I teach my own classes just through Zoom. Right now, they're $10. And I usually do advanced beginner and intermediate, but I do have a Vimeo page now where you can rent like beginner classes and past classes that I've taught.
And how does somebody reach out to find out how to take all those classes and whatnot?
Uh, you can find it on my Instagram or Danny Gardner tap classes on Facebook. If you type that in, I have a specific page for that that has I update with all the classes coming up. Yeah.
And everybody go, like, even if you don't think you're ever gonna, I knew so many people in school who were like, well, I'm not a tapper, I'm never gonna be called in for tap things or what. Like, you will, it's gonna happen. And this is absolutely the safest way to put your toe
Oh,
in
yeah.
the water to do it. Because if you don't want, Danny can't even see you. So
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's
Danny's
opened up
a
this.
very, very, very good teacher. So, and
Thanks.
very
Thanks.
nice. So go take class from him. He's
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything, I was going to say anything coming up that you want to plug, but I don't know if there's anything coming up for any of us for like
Um,
Civil War's over.
yeah, right. I've been teaching, yeah, I've been teaching tap. Oddly, in the last like week, I've been kind of busy. I've been choreographing for this show. Joshua Holden, he was in Avenue Q. He's an amazing puppeteer and performer. He has a show that's called the Joyfully Jolly Jamboree that's going to be premiering next year. It's kind of a winter show that's just so joyful as it is in the title. But I'm choreographing that, which is so fun because I get to be on the other side of the table, and I'm finding it so rewarding. I love it. Um, and then I just shot a short film, if you could believe that. It's with David Gallo, who he's a designer.
Oh, I know David Gallup.
Yeah, he won a Tony, he won an Emmy. But he developed this a short film. It's a clown piece. It's a two-person clown piece that we actually shot last week through the Creative Coalition. If you don't know them, they're great coalition, great company that kind of tries to take the arts and chooses a topic to kind of address in a creative way. And this one was about obesity. And so it was a really interesting piece. I'm not sure when it's going to premiere, but that will sometime, So look out for the Jolly Jamboree, and it's called Fat.Life. That's the movie.
Do you know if your show is going to be coming back to Lincoln Center? Have they told you anything about that?
As of now, it is.
That's
Yeah. So whenever sometimes we have Zooms, everybody gets together and just checks in with everybody. And they seem very adamant about bringing it back. So, yeah, I'm thinking, they said summer, fall. We might start rehearsal summer and then actually start previews fall. But yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Well, everybody go check out Danny's website, and there's wonderful clips that will make you smile and laugh, which I think is very important. Right now, we could all use some things to make us smile. And go take dance class from him. And thank you again so much for
Thank you.
your expertise.